Tēnā tātou no mai ki Aha Te Whakatau. The elections are just over 10 weeks away and campaigns are in full swing. Policies are rolling in fast from most parties, and with the clock ticking down, parties will need to convince voters why in the world they deserve votes.
Tika tonu rā, he taunui whakaharahara tēnei. Me te mea nei, e tika ana kia whakaro ake ngā pāti ki ngā take e hāngai ana ki te Māori, kia kaue haere poka noa ki runga I te marae, e rangi me hāngai. Anyway, ko riku ai ahau, I'm riku ai, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, I'm Māni, kia ora, and nau mai hoki mai ki Aha Te Whakatau. A ka hiri ki tō tātou kai hautu a whati, kia ana.
Tēnā kōrua, tēnā tātou. Ai, kei te ora, aha koa ngā uauatanga o te wā, e mihi atu ana kia tātou.
Tēnā koe.
Well, so to kick off the headlines this week, the ACT Party has released policy that would reform the public service and end race-based hiring. ACT leader David Seymour says people shouldn't be forced to karakia in the workplace. ACT also released another policy called One Law for All, which would restrict the use of tikanga in the courts and require governments to explicitly define treaty obligations in law. Kia tahuri atu tātou.
Why is it that you have such a resistance to things Māori?
I don't.
It feels like it.
Well, I can't be responsible for your feelings, Moana. You have to consider the possibility that what I'm saying may be true. And would you want that? People feeling they're being indoctrinated against their will, people feeling that they're going to miss out on job opportunities or even miss out on promotion or not get a job at all because of their beliefs. I don't believe you believe that.
Well, kāre mātou I whakai me tāna kōrero. Kei te tino hoha mātou. I te mea puta I te rautaki e pāne ki te kaikiri I ngā wāka tō. Koina tāna mahi, tāna rautaki. Riri mātou.
Tētahi āhuaranga e tino rongo nei au, e taia ana e etahi te kōrero moenei mea, te rāweki, te tiriti. You know, this kaupapa here, actually ka hoatu tētahi mana nui ki te whare paremata, mā te whare paremata e whakatau te nui o te wāriu o te tiriti ki roto I ngā ture. You know, it gives a lot of power to Parliament to be able to define the role of te tiriti across different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at how democracy works and how the estates and the system works, right? Parliament makes the law, creates the law, and the courts apply and interpret it. And so, essentially, what ACT and what Seymour is saying is that he's labelled them activist judges, referring to the Supreme Court decision of Alice, Macca, and all of the, those are more judgments, and saying that tikanga is kind of being not used in the right way, and it shouldn't be used within our courts. I spoke to Carwyn Jones, treaty law expert, and he was saying that what they're trying to say is that that's how it's already set up,
Yeah.
And this is a relitigation of the Treaty Principles Bill in kind of a more constitutional reform approach.
Yeah, and you might have some thoughts on this, but something that, it really gets me is that we have a party who is very ready to have these big conversations on one end of the spectrum that really takes a look at limiting te tiriti in Aotearoa. But the other end of the conversation, constitutional transformation, the implementation of things like matike mai, making sure that we honour te tiriti, that's almost seen as laughable to have that conversation in Aotearoa.
Kua puta hoki e tai kōrero e mea na kei te hoha rātou. I te wā ka puta I tēnei pāti wenei momo kaupapa here, te rongo I te reo te Māori. Aha kua ko te tiriti o Waitangi, he kawenata kei te mōheo, tātou katoa tēnei I waenga I te iwi Māori, me te krauna, engari te rongo I te rā reo. Me te aha, going back to your conversation with Dr. Carwyn, I puta I ai a te rā kōrero, e rongo ana I te haunga o te rā pire nei o te Treaty Principles Bill pēr.
Yeah, and I think that it's not uncommon for us as Māori to talk about constitutional transformation, to talk about making sure that we do something implement the actual intentions of te tiriti into Aotearoa. We've had this canvas for a really long time, we've had experts that have gone around the motu to talk about this. And I just find it, when I look around online, on social media, on various different platforms, how palatable some of ACT's policies are to a broad base around the place, but he's also ignoring the thousands and thousands of people that marched to Wellington to say, hey, no to the treaty principles, but now we've got 2.0 out here. And I don't think he's actually, there's no listening.
And I think he was asked in the press conference, did you consult with Māori? And he kind of turned around to his caucus and said, oh, well, we are Māori, and so that is our consultation. But, looking at the Constitution Act and the legislation that he wants this policy proposes to change, these are really significant and foundational pieces within Aotearoa that need the conversation, like Mā Tiki Mai, the report in 2016, acknowledging the late Papa Moana Jackson, and obviously, Auntie Margaret, who led that formidable, amazing transformational mahi. So, yeah, I mean, it's bringing in that constitutional kōrero again, but it's also just kind of a relitigation, or like you say, a bit of a 2.0 in a different way. But also, the government is already proposing a treaty review clause, which this is also proposing. So much of the same. It checks out in terms of the agenda. On brand, on brand.
Yeah, it really is. And actually, let's just carry on to the next one, because I think it kind of e hāngai ana. So New Zealand First Deputy Leader Shane Jones is warning the Waitangi Tribunal that sweeping change is coming should they return to government. This comes as the government considers an already completed review into the tribunal's scope, purpose and functions. It hasn't yet been publicly released, but let's have a look at his kōrero.
If you continue to thwart the democratic mandate of small parties like New Zealand First, you are imperiling your very existence. My message to the members of the Waitangi Tribunal, please focus your judgment upon those issues that add to cohesiveness.
Yeah, so this has been cropping up quite a bit on the tiles, especially with Shane Jones talking about, some of the, the recent report into the treaty review, clause review that we were just talking about, and how the tribunal had found it was a major breach. And there's, as part of the coalition agreement that was part of reviewing the Waitangi Tribunal, and the report is done but hasn't been released. And I think there's still, lots of conversations behind the scenes as to what they agree on or don't agree on. I think it's been a year ago, and there still needs to go to Cabinet, so...
Yeah, and, there's a significant place that the Waitangi Tribunal plays for Māori. They have a really important role. And when we think about, the access to be able to hear grievances and to hear the impacts of something that's affecting Māori communities in particular, you can see the importance of that role. Not every group of Māori, not every iwi, not every hapu has the resource to be able to go to take it to other court processes. This is the pathway. And when we have governments that don't listen or refuse to read the report or decide not to take on the recommendations, that can be quite difficult for Māori communities. And if there was to be a look at it, then maybe we can look at giving it a bit more mana.
I just want to say quickly to our whānau who are tuned in at the moment, this is an open wānanga. So if you have anything to say, feel free to put your comments in, your pātai, in the comment section, and we'll happily join in. But kei te tautoko i ngā kōrero. Also, I just want to give a little shout out to our whānau who are quite active on social media, who are putting together information around which parties support what policy in terms of te tiriti or Waitangi. And so there's a checklist floating around on social media, giving our whānau a visual on who supports what. Interestingly, though, I kōrero atu au kia Willie Jackson i te wiki kua pahure, e hara i te mea ko Shane Jones nahe e whakaaro pērā ana, ko Willie Jackson hoki kei te whakae kia kaua e whakau i te mana o te ropu whakamana i te tiriti o Waitangi i roto i te ture. So interesting that, Willie Jackson came out with that kōrero.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that if the tribunal isn't going to be the pathway where Māori are being able to be heard, then we need to make sure, the government needs to make sure there are pathways and access ways to make sure that they can hear those things and those impacts of the things that they're doing on Māori communities. And
how the tribunal, I guess, is fit for purpose as well, in terms of how, because it's changed in terms of from its conception, Maturata, who set it in place, and then, the kaupapa inquiries that have kind of come from that. And so, how is it being applied, and how can we apply it in the best way? But yeah. Well, let's go to some of the other policies that have been in the headlines. National's proposed online safety bill would ban under-16s from using social media platforms such as TikTok and Facebook. While experts and students see the potential benefits, tangatahi are not sure if a ban is the right solution.
Mōku ake ka whakahe.
Ka whai huarahi anō rātou ki te uru atu ki wērā mahi.
E aua
wanga o ki awa mō mea nā te mea ka he ao ke te whakamati ko tēnei ao.
E mihi ana ki ngā tauira o te o Maniriwa, te wharekura o Maniriwa I roto I te rakohinga kōrero. E mihi ana kia koutou. And you know what? While we're talking about all these things coming out of Parliament, and I saw the social media ban thing come up and I thought, you know what? You might need a ban yourself. Hey, e tahi o ngā kōrero e puta ana
I got that boomer ban.
You know, can we ban the kaikiri? And can we ban, you know, just a bit of that noise, eh?
Yeah, I know, but there's rangatahi, because I mean, and it's cool hearing all the varied views of our rangatahi, because man, they're switched on. I don't remember being that switched on at that age or that engaged in politics. But it's been so cool having conversations, and every time, you know, I see rangatahi, I'm like, yeah, what do you think? And but you know, I can understand the counter to it, because we've seen it as obviously been carried out in Australia, and so we're kind of following suit in that regard. And just to be clear, you know, it's not going to be introduced before the election. So if National get in, then obviously this will be one of their policies that will be introduced. But I think though one of the key kind of counters to it, which I've seen a lot of mental health advocates say, is that it's actually a place where a lot of rangatahi find their people and find their community. And so, you know, it has saved lives, or it has, you know, encouraged like takatapui, you know, rangatahi who may not feel, you know, included or welcomed. And so, you know, there's that, it's always the tension, eh?
Yeah, and I think that we've seen the use of social media as a platform for people to express their feelings, particularly over this term, across a different range of kaupapa. A lot of rangatahi have used social media as a bit of an avenue to be able to whakaputa I o rātou whakaro, whakaputa nawe, and also whakaputa I etahi rongoā, ki etahi mea e kite ana rātou I roto I o rātou hapori.
Well, you know, I just think back to when I was at school, which wasn't too long ago, by the way.
Same.
Bebo, you know, we all had the Bebos, and I remember my kura banning Bebo at kura. But the thing with rangatahi back then, and rangatahi now, they're always going to find a way. And I heard in some of the reporting that rangatahi are talking about VPNs and the workaround. And so I think the thing that everybody agrees on across the spectrum, inside the house, outside the house, is there's something that needs to happen to protect rangatahi, because we know the harm that some of these social media platforms cause. But how we get there, I suppose, is the thing that's been nattered.
And look at the corporations who are running, you know, the social media, you know, and how, like you say, how is it monitored? But, you know, speaking of engagement, you know, we've spoken a lot on this in the last few episodes around the Māori roll, the general roll and enrolments, but we've got the official figures for the Māori roll and the general roll, and they've been released, and let's just have a look at those. So significant number and record numbers of people changing roles.
Yeah, that's massive. And I mean, there's probably a lot to say to Tanya Waikato, you know, and all the different campaigns that have been going on.
Yeah, because that last push, we didn't like that last month before the cut-off to either go from the general to the Māori roll. There was the Tanya Waikato bikini campaign, there was the whānau ora, the Māori roll call that was relaunched, and then there was, you know, other kind of online Toitū Te Tiriti were doing a campaign, like it was kind of across the board, and so there was that massive push. But I think like it was 10,000 new Māori enrolments, and I think 7,000 of those are on the Māori roll and the other onto the general roll. The 2023 election, it was I think only 3,000 new enrolments. So that is massive. And that speaks to, it's indicative of the engagement, right?
Yeah, that's right. And we've seen over the course of this term more people engaged in submissions, more people engaged in the conversation. You know, we have people that tune into Parliament TV these days, you know, and so we're seeing this play out. And there was always this concern as to whether or not all of this movement would lead to a sense of fatigue, but actually by the numbers it looks like people are maintaining that engagement.
Yeah, and I'll put my pessimism was definitely thinking that there would be fatigue, because looking at the by-election, Tamaki by-election voter turnout was so low, which by-elections always are. But I was like, goodness, is that going to be reflected in the enrolment? And people still can enrol, you know, before October the 25th, which is part of the change.
I also think it's a sign of the times, the political climate that we're currently in. People are as you said, people are becoming more active. But you know, me mihi ka tika ki te iwi Māori, e mahi ana I nei mahi. Ko te manako nui though, eh? It's all good registering, it's all good swapping roles, but hei te noema, hei te tuawhitu.
And just those numbers I think I was referencing before, I think it's about more than 10,000 new enrolments, and those will just keep growing because a lot of those new enrolments as well will be rangatahi who will be the first time to vote.
Yeah, exciting times. Hioi. I te wikine, ko te hake nei, I tai atu ngā kaitono mo te tūru o te tai hauauru ki marae, ki te pati pōti i ngā kai noho I tō rātou rohe. Kia tiro ake tātou.
Kia ora te whānau o te tai hauauru.
Tēnā tātou.
I want to thank Te Tai Hauauru for the honour to be in this position.
I am looking for your vote as your candidate for this upcoming year's election.
By 2040, 200 years after our tupuna signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi, 1 in 5 people in New Zealand will whakapapa Māori.
And we need to build an Aotearoa where those solutions can come to fruition.
And so for me, I'm standing to make sure Te Tai Hauauru has a choice. Kei o ringa, it's in your hands.
We trust that you will choose for your mokopuna, for our tile, the best party to tautoko.
Two ticks.
Kia ora.
Interesting. You know, it's interesting having these debates earlier, and just shout out to Marae who had this on the weekend, having these early debates when the policies are still coming out. But how did you think they went?
Well, you know, I thought Te Pūoho was quite polished. He was quite together, especially because this is his first hit out. And I thought that he was sharp. He obviously brought some of his. There was a couple of bits there where he got a little bit stuck, but overall, I thought he performed quite well in that.
And you know, I guess also speaks to his background. You know, economic kind of corporate-y vibes, want for a better term. That you can kind of really see that, and the team that he has around him, and the whānau that he has around him.
And I did think that Whaideb really did talk to her like grassroots experience. She knows her people. You know, she leaned into her understanding of the volunteer work that happens across her electorate, which is interesting. And actually, it talks to that wide, the diverse needs of that rohe. Also, the only rohe with a national candidate.
I know. Yeah. What did we think of Coral Raukawa, who's a councillor, and this is the only seat.
Yeah, I think Te Tai Hauauru, they're quite lucky in terms of who they can pick for their candidate, because you could see just, you know, the knowledge, the expertise and their backgrounds coming into play. But Coral, quite surprising. You know, not to bloody stereotype, but she's just got such a warm presence about her. She's almost like that auntie that greets you at the marae, you know?
She got a shout out at the candidate list announcement by the Prime Minister when they did their candidate list announcement. Oh, you know, we've got Coral Raukawa and Hauauru. I was like, she is number 56 on the list though. And so, you know, chances are pretty slim of her getting in and getting in on the list, let alone getting in on the seat. But I mean, it looks like she's there to participate. So ka pai.
Yeah. Ka pai. He nui I nei momo kōrero, Te Pāti Māori. They launched their strategy for the election, asking whānau to candidate vote for them and party vote for their possible coalition partners. It sparked conversations around the kai table on how whānau might want to vote come election time. Kia tiro ake tātou.
So, when hoki tāku kia tātou, why would you settle for anything else but to take 13 Māori voices into Parliament to represent our people? And then, candidate vote the 7th sitting year. More Māori in Parliament, it determines a one-term government, because that's what everybody's been asking for. You want a one-term government? This is the strategy.
I'm interested to know what we all think about this, because this is actually a huge conversation online right now about the strategic vote.
Yeah.
And, you know, all the extra words that come with it, and the overhang and the ahatu and the ahatu.
There's been, and I think, like, it is to some degree, with a lot of the commentary I've seen, a lot from non-Māori commentators as well, kind of criticising it quite overtly. I mean, this is what MMP is, and I think we've already kind of alluded to that it was the assumption that this is the strategy in which they would play, and the way it's been framed, it's kind of two ways it's been framed. So if you give your party vote to, or you give candidate vote to Te Pāti Māori, say in Te Tai Tohiro, where the other parties are high on the list, then you get a 3-for-1 or a 2-for-1 or a 4-for-1 or what that might look like. And so the idea is to have as many Māori in Parliament. But then there's the kōrero of the overhang. Can you try and just... What is this overhang kōrero Rokuwai?
Well, we already have an overhang in Parliament right now. Yes. We do. And all of this is quite dependent on a few factors too, right, as to whether or not that's going to change the government. And, you know, there's smarter people than me that have things on social media. E kōrero ana mō tēnei. But one thing is that significantly, the coalition government would have to get significantly less support. You know, that would have to be a thing. Top is also in the mix. So whether or not they'll be making that kingmaker position if the polls are right, and that looks like how they land on the 7th. You know, there's a whole lot of factors as to whether or not an overhang could actually change the government. But, you know, I think that what Te Pāti Māori is doing is really just saying what's already happening.
You know, my whakaaro is... I think it's you know, I just think it's a missed opportunity because all these strategies are happening in isolation, ki te taha rewhe. And I tuku atu au, I whiu atu au wera pātai ki ngā ropu tōrangapū ki te taha Maui. Like, if you're trying, you know, they proclaim to want to change the government. So in my mind, I'm like, would it not make sense to maybe have a yarn on how they might be able to do that as a collective? Obviously, it didn't go anywhere. But all those parties are super keen to work together. It's just no one knows, or no one could tell me how they might do that. They were talking about post-election, you know, forming a potential government. But in order for the strategy to actually, you know, bit of kotahitanga as you move towards November 9. So I just wanted to chuck that out there anyway.
Yeah, kia ora. And I think we've got some graphics. Let's have a look at the last election numbers, because this might help us set some scenes. So let's start with Taihoauru, where Wha Debbie won by heaps.
Yeah, there's a significant margin, eh?
Yeah, and I mean, there's that diversity across that whole electorate. You know, we have the awa, the maunga, we have the tata atu ki te taone, ki roto o Ngāti Toa, te taha ki te pūoho. So it's a huge, you know, to think about those diverse needs.
Yeah, and I think coming to the strategic voting element, I don't think, you know, Te Pūoho isn't high enough on the list to be able to kind of have that approach, because if you were to give Debbie the candidate vote, then he's unlikely to get in on the list as well. And I think it could be a tight race there.
Yeah, I think it could be a tight race.
Let's have a look at the numbers in Te Tai Tokerau. How did they fall last time? Whaia Maria Meno?
See, that's really close.
Yes.
517 votes. And e mohi ana tātou i te nuinga o ana, you know, the booths that she won were closer to the Tāmaki end of the electorate. At
the West Auckland side, eh?
Yeah. And also, the thing that's different in this election is that the Greens this time look like they have a solid chance in some of the seats, including Te Tai Tokerau.
Yes, yeah, I mean, on the ground, Huhana's been, you know, she's very kanohi kitia.
Yeah.
Is that all the kaupapa? I mean, so is Willow Jean, arguably, and is getting a lot of good feedback from on the ground as well. But, you know, Apira Hama Edwards is obviously the candidate for Te Pāti Māori. That is a real slight margin from the last election. And Maria Mino obviously standing again and for Te Tai Tokerau Pāti, obviously after getting kicked out of Te Pāti Māori.
Now, Tamaki Makaurau is interesting. E te kāna me mihi kia taku tai Tash Kemp I tōna rironga I tērā kōwhiringa pōti. And obviously we know that Orini is now the member. Another exciting rohe pōti, ne?
Yes, another one. And obviously the by-election is a little bit different, eh? It switches up. You get a kind of lower voter turnout, although Orini won by a lot at the by-election.
Well, this is when the strategic voting did work. It was the 2-for-1 campaign, right? Because Penny was already in, so why would they vote for him when he was already in there advocating? But you know, I think that was probably one of the things that really led to his resignation from the Labour Party.
Yeah, I think that'll be an interesting one to watch, and we know that Kieran had a mayoralty race. You know, in the middle.
Kieran Leone for that, the candidate, Labour
the candidate for Labour, I roto i Tāmaki Makaurau. So this one's going to be quite good to watch, I think. It'll be quite tight.
I mean, you know, all our electorates are exciting, but the next one, you know, would be just as exciting. Hey, hauraki waikato.
Yes, and this was a huge, you know,
I
win.
ate my words on election night because I had to, because I said that there was no way that Nanaia Mahuta was going to get beaten, and I was proven wrong.
Yeah.
And again, this speaks to how exciting Māori electorates are, and you can never know.
And this is where it really is, eh? The Māori electorates. The Māori electorates is where people are like, actually, you like are very strategic.
Yes.
We like how we have people that we like, and we know how we like to support them.
And you know, Kingi Kirona, who's the Labour candidate for Hauraki Waikato this year, and we've said before, you know, a bit of an admission from Labour putting him high on the list that it's going to probably be Hana that takes it because he's going to get in as well. So, you know, the strategic approach there, 2-for-1, also applicable. Yeah.
ki te rohe o te waiariki, and just to your point there about the kakarikis putting, you know, kaitono in these seats, this is one of them as well. But look, 15,000 votes.
That's massive.
It's huge.
That's huge. That's a lot to claw back.
But we've seen it, you know, we've seen it being pulled back as well. But I think, again, the Green candidate for Tāne Waikato, who's been campaigning and has a huge online presence as well.
Yeah.
And I was at a kaupapa recently that had a lot of waiariki constituents at that kaupapa, and I asked, you know, obviously using it as my own little social experiment, oh, well, are you going to vote for And they were like, oh, it's hard, you know, a lot of Te Pāti Māori diehards, but also they see Tanya online, they see her at all the kaupapa, and so that'll be another interesting race as well.
Yeah, and I think that there's like some really significant issues within their electorate. Like I think about whareroa and those whānau that have been for many governments dealing with a lot of the things that have impacted their kāinga, that a lot of those thoughts are going to come into play as to who's going to be the MP to best support some of these aspirations going forward.
And also the only electorate that has Opportunity Party candidates, which will be really interesting as well to see how that kind of plays out, because they're still the Opportunity Party is still yet to release their treaty policy as well. So we don't really know where they stand on Māori issues quite yet.
Our next rohe is the only rohe that Labour won a seat in at the last election. Ikaroa Rāwhiti, exciting, yet another exciting race for this seat.
Yeah, and I mean, Kushala's also had some really good moments in the House this term. She's really advocated very strongly for her rohe. And you have Hayley Maxwell, who's been on the campaign for a while now. You know, she's been putting in quite a bit of effort throughout this term. I think this is going to be a really interesting one to have a look at. And since Te Pāti Māori did their launch out there, you know, they
really, very, like Willie Te Aho, the Vice Tāne President for Te Pāti Māori, obviously driven by him and kind of really putting their support behind Hayley in order to try and get that seat. But Kusha does have a really good reputation on the ground. The Labour Party are having their Māori launch this weekend in Wainuiomata, which, as we know with those electorates, that captures in Ikaroa Rāwhiti. So both major Māori launches, both in Ikaroa Rāwhiti.
And this next rohe is interesting. Just like Te Taitokere, we have independent member occupying the tudu. So, you know, he won by over 2,000 votes. So that race is heating up as well.
Well, yeah, obviously Taku Tawhera no longer with Te Pāti Māori. He's running as an independent, which we found out over the weekend on an announcement on Sunday.
There was a little bit funny, because it was like, it was a little bit funny, because it was like, I've got an announcement, tune in.
At 4 p.m. and I was tuned in.
I was tuned in, I was really fun. I was ready to bring you the tea. And then it kind of just reinforced what is already what we understand of takuta in the seat.
Yeah, and because the Labour candidate Mananui Ramsden, who isn't on the list, which is again an indication that Labour are pretty confident that he'll get through.
Yeah, so interesting. Also, this is where it's at, though. The Māori seats is actually where it's at. And I just want to mihi to everyone, because those are great lineups. Those are great people, no matter who you vote for.
I know. So the debates, as we get into them, especially here at Whakatau Māori, it's going to be so interesting. And we're going to have some polls, and we're going to have the tea.
Yeah, we're going to have it all. Just pull up your seat. Let's have a go. Anyway, ki te tahi kaupapa nui,
a young person was assaulted by his peers at a youth justice residence in a ritual attack known as walking the line. As the youth was leaving to be discharged, he walked the line, as they call it, which meant 2 lines of rangatahi on either side hit the young person as he exited.
Can you imagine what it is like for that young person to have to walk that line to leave that youth justice facility and to be hit and punched?
To say that it's heartbreaking is an understatement.
We should be disturbed, deeply disturbed about this.
This is yet another kaupapa that goes across all governments, and while we're talking about the safety of tamariki online, we have thousands of tamariki that are in state care that also deserve safety, and it'll be really good, no matter who makes the government on November 7, to prioritise these things as a real thing, because our tamariki shouldn't be going through this. He oi e te ui. Tēnā koutou I whakarongo mai ki tēnei te ringa. Come back in 2 weeks, we're going to have the tea. Kia wete ai tātou i ngā kaupapa porotiki o te wā.
Thank you for listening to this episode or watching this episode. See you next time. Noho ora mai whānau.